Porto, a back room at the currency exchange. 2 banknotes, laid flat under a lamp. Same serial number, same prefix, same everything. The paper, the ink, the watermark, all of it real. There was only one problem. The bank had only ever printed one of them. By morning, the vaults of Portugal's central bank would be sealed. A newspaper would call it a national crisis, and the man responsible would already be in a cell. For the second time in 18 months. His name was Alves dos Reis. He was the son of a failing funeral director, and by the time he was 30, he had talked one of the most respected printing houses in the world into handing him the keys to a country's money supply. Not by breaking into the bank, by getting the bank to print it for him. He was about to become the man who outprinted the printer. He tried to be a legitimate man of consequence once, and it hadn't worked. In 1916, running from family trouble, he'd sailed for Angola. Before he left, he built himself a credential, a diploma from an Oxford engineering school that existed nowhere but on the page he'd forged, complete with the signature of a dean who had never met him. It got him status in the colony. It got him nothing more. By 1924, he was in a Porto jail cell, arrested for looting a railway company's funds with a bad check. 54 days later, a legal technicality set him free. He didn't waste the time inside. He used it to read the bank's own rulebook, cover to cover, looking for the hole in it. He found one. The Bank of Portugal, he learned, kept no independent department to check whether a banknote serial number had already been printed. None. So he built a plan around that single gap and around one company 3 countries away that had no reason to doubt him yet. The plan needed a fiction, and Reis built an elaborate one. He drafted a secret loan contract. A consortium of international financiers would lend Angola's struggling colonial government £1.3 million. And in exchange, the Bank of Portugal would authorize new currency, printed in the exact same value, for circulation in the colony. He forged the signatures of Portugal's Angola commissioner and finance minister onto it, bound the pages in ribbon, and sealed them shut with red wax stamped from consulates that had never approved a thing. Then, he cast himself as the deal's sole intermediary, the only man standing between the money and the bank. He needed people who could move it, so he recruited them. Karel Moray carried a Liberian diplomatic passport and a reputation earned at the Dutch Red Cross, respectability that let his courier boxes glide past customs untouched. Jose Bandeira, brother to Portugal's ambassador in The Hague, had a diplomatic pouch of his own. Adolf Hennies, a German operator with a spy's instincts, knew how to move money once it landed. Through Moran, Reyes reached Sir William Waterlow himself, head of the London firm that printed Portugal's actual currency, and handed him a second forged contract, this one bearing the signatures of the Bank of Portugal's own president and vice president. Waterlow believed him. He believed the secrecy story Moran fed him about a divided board that couldn't be told. He ran the entire arrangement personally, never once bringing it to his own company's directors. His staff warned him that only one specific institution held authority to issue Angolan currency, and it wasn't the Bank of Portugal. He waved it off. He even sent his confirmation letters to Lisbon, not through the mail, but by hand, carried by Bandeira, the very courier with every reason to make sure they never arrived. By March of 1925, the first shipment, worth roughly £800,000, was already inside Portugal, riding in a diplomatic pouch no customs officer was permitted to open. Then came the part that made it. In June, Reis founded a bank of his own, Banco de Angola and Metropole, a clean, legitimate-looking institution built to launder the flood of new notes into ordinary commerce. And that October, he and Henny staged a grand tour of Angola, arriving as saviors of a struggling colony. The crowds didn't know his signature was forged onto half the paper in his briefcase. They called him Portugal's own Cecil Rhodes. It should have ended there. A forger mistaken for a visionary standing in the sun. But the plan had cracks in it from the start. And they weren't in the paper. They were in Reis himself. The Bank of Portugal changed its signing officials every 20,000 notes printed. Reis, working from memory and a stolen rulebook, told Waterlow's press to change them every 10,000 instead. He ordered the printer to reuse the bank's existing serial numbers rather than issue a new series, which meant that somewhere, someday, two identical notes were bound to meet. And on one production run, a clerk transcribing a list of bank directors' names wrote A. Pereira Lima, where it should have read A. Pereira Jr. Waterlow's staff caught the typo. They fixed it without asking why it was there. What Reis didn't know was that a Lisbon newspaper had already started asking questions of its own. Since September, reporters at O Século had been digging into how a brand new bank could hand out loans at absurdly low interest without ever collecting a single deposit to fund them. The answer came from a teller, not a journalist. A currency exchange clerk in Porto noticed something odd. Crisp, unworn 500 escudo notes arriving one after another in unbroken sequence, as if they'd come straight from a printing press, with nobody standing between the ink and the till. He reported it. The Bank of Portugal sent an inspector, João Teixeira Doreto, north to look. The notes passed every test Doreto had. Right paper, right watermark, right thickness. So he ordered his staff to do something slower and cruder. Lay every note on the table and sort them, one by one, by serial number. They worked past midnight. And somewhere in that pile, two notes came to rest side by side. 1K, number 02201. Identical. By morning, O Século ran the headline that ended it. The country in crisis, and Portugal's central bank sealed every branch of Reis's bank in a single day. He was arrested before noon. What they found, once they started counting, was worse than anyone in that back room had guessed. Waterlow Sons had printed 580,000 of the duplicate notes for Reis, worth 290 million escudos. 16.5% of every banknote in circulation in Portugal, traced back to a scheme built in a jail cell. To protect public trust in its own paper, the Bank of Portugal recalled every single 500 escudo Vasco da Gama note in the country, real and forged alike, and reissued the lot. The flood of unbacked money that followed helped drive inflation that would, within a year, help topple the government itself. By May of 1926, the military had taken over. Portugal wouldn't see another free election for nearly half a century. Reis stood trial in 1930. 20 years, the harshest sentence Portuguese fraud law allowed. He served 15 of them, was released in 1945, and turned down the one job he was offered on the outside, a position at a bank. He died a decade later in Lisbon without much money at all. The company that printed his fortune for him never recovered either. Portugal's central bank sued Waterlow Sons in the British courts in a case that dragged on for years and became one of the most expensive in English legal history. In 1932, the House of Lords ordered Waterlow to pay over £600,000 in damages. One judge, weighing the sheer nerve of what Reis had built, called it a fraud with almost no equal anywhere in financial history. Waterlow never shook off the damage to its name. By 1961, its own rival had bought what was left of it. 2 banknotes from that scheme still exist today, kept behind glass in a museum in London. Same prefix, same number, 2 originals printed on the same real plates by the same real hands, at the request of a man the bank never actually authorized to ask.